Need for Speed was always about the vibe. If you're not in the know, Need for Speed is an arcade racer which goes all the way back to 1994. It's not trying to be a realistic simulator like iRacing. In fact, it's way closer to Mario Kart than a sim racer, but it still maintains some realism. Need for Speed, you see, is more about the feeling of driving a car. Dare I say, it's trying to capture the need for speed. It's not that realistic racing games are a bad thing, they have their place in the racing game market, but comparing something like Assetto Corsa to Need for Speed really is just comparing apples to oranges. Ask any Need for Speed player about any of the games that they recommend, and chances are that you will get the same three recommendations: Need for Speed Most Wanted 2005, Need for Speed Underground, and Need for Speed Underground 2. So you'll understand it when I say that each Need for Speed, good or not, at least tried to catch a specific vibe about racing through the aesthetics, the presentation, storyline, and music. The older games were more about the vibe of just driving fast through the countryside. Most Wanted had a grungy B-movie vibe to it. Underground was just the pure embodiment of the flashy and maximalist car culture of the 2000s with a shot of Fast and Furious injected into it. And Pro Street was a fresh take on the act of pushing a shitbox to its very limits in a festival fueled by adrenaline, gasoline, and I assume methamphetamine too. These days, Need for Speed players look back on Pro Street in particular very fondly, but when this game released back in 2007, people hated it because it wasn't the street racing with police cars and riced out supercars that people were familiar with. So it was back to the drawing board for Black Box, and they released Need for Speed Undercover. So again, it was back to the drawing board for Black Box, and thus Need for Speed Terrorfive was born. Now, we have to address the elephant in the room. Why exactly did Need for Speed Terrorfive go for hackers? Keep in mind, this is 2008, so they really wouldn't have media like Mr. Robot or shit, even Watch Dogs to base it on. But I suspect that it's because of Project Chanology, which at around the time Terrorfive was conceptualized, it was a huge story. In a nutshell, because of the Scientology cult trying to remove an embarrassing clip of Tom Cruise, 4chan users started harassing the cult and protesting and even posting an infamous video message to the Church of Scientology. Important to the development of Terrorfive, however, was the fact that the church labeled these guys as cyber terrorists. So most likely one of the guys at EA was like, "Hey man, so you know about that anonymous 4chan guy that's been hacking Scientology recently or something?" "Yeah? Why?" "Oh, you know, cause I heard the latest Need for Speed didn't go over so well." "Yeah, it's cause we didn't get a lot of time to..." Wait, what does that have to do with the Chanology stuff though? Okay, listen to me. What if we make a Need for Speed, with hackers? Excuse me, and oh dear god, it takes place after 9/11. I don't think that's a good idea. Oh yeah, we already started development on that. You what? The guy who came up with the idea in question was studio art director Wilson Tang, and while I tried searching up who he is, not much came up aside from two results. One, Wilson Tang owns a dim sum place in New York, and the other is a CEO of a game design company called Yume Bao. I assume that's our guy, or who knows, maybe they're the same guy. Now, when that skit happened, I assume that Wilson Tang was under the influence of three separate illegal substances. Now the question is, what are they and where can I get them? So Need for Speed Terrorfive was supposed to be about a group of street racing hackers in a post 9/11 America where racers turned the city's surveillance systems against it, using smartphones and online networks to organize races and manage underground betting. The city branded them as terrorists, and the racers embraced the name, calling themselves Terror 5. The player's goal was to rise through the underground scene and earn a place among this infamous crew. This quote comes from WylieStyles. Now, I can make a whole separate video about who this guy is, but the long and short of it is that he's the creative director of a lot of things, including Need for Speed Unbound. Right now, he has this graffiti-ish art style which you can see in Unbound, but then he used to have this tech-inspired art style which made him perfect for the part. Nowadays, he also dabbles in AI and NFTs, but we don't talk about that, okay? We're talking about Need for Speed Hackerman, god damn it. Dig a bit deeper and you'll recognize that he worked with Prologue Films, a VFX and title design company which you might recognize with Fast X, and a lot of other Marvel related projects like Iron Man, so the two of them are pretty loaded. So what they came up with was a blend of WylieStyles and an average episode of Serial Experiments Lane. The UI admittedly was harsh on the eyes and quite hard to read, but then again, it's still a concept design, who knows? You had to connect your device to the secret Terrorfive network, presumably, in order to gain access to race events around the city. But eventually, the idea was dumped, and Terrorfive was never heard from again. Or was it? You see, shortly after, like 2 years after, Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2010 was released, thus beginning the Hot Pursuit era of Need for Speed. And games released around that time had a lot of suspiciously similar qualities to Terrorfive. Would it be a stretch to say that a lot of the elements of Terrorfive carried over to the Hot Pursuit era? I mean, impromptu races that could only be accessed through a secret network, cops chasing you down and shit. Even the pursuit tech could have also been a carryover from the Terrorfive concept. Terrorfive's vibe again was supposed to emphasize rebellion, raging against the machine with machines. These people are the type of people to wear acronym and fucking Machine 56, Arknight's looking ass. So games like Need for Speed Shift and Need for Speed The Run cannot be inspired by Terrorfive, because in these games, technology doesn't play a major role. But for the Hot Pursuit era games, on the other hand, now we're talking. Aside from the obvious things I mentioned earlier, Most Wanted 2012 directly is inspired by Need for Speed Terrorfive. If you don't know, the end result of Need for Speed Most Wanted 2012 was a result of EA rushing Criterion to finish. If they weren't, then Need for Speed Most Wanted 2012 was going to be a direct sequel to the 2005 Most Wanted, presumably taking place a few years after Need for Speed Carbon. It's a long story, but if they weren't rushed, then Most Wanted 2012 was supposed to have this modern but grungy feel to it. The garage preview of the cars was supposed to be somewhat similar to Need for Speed Rivals, another Hot Pursuit era game, and one of the mood boards for Need for Speed Most Wanted 2012 directly mentions hacking and surveillance. That is literally Terrorfive's whole shtick. In an alternate universe, Most Wanted 2012 could have been peak. We were fucking robbed. Seriously though, Most Wanted 2012's concept looks like what Terrorfive could have been if it was polished up a little bit more. The closest we got to a real Need for Speed Terrorfive was Need for Speed Rivals. It had a lot of the aspects that Most Wanted 2012's concept had. It was grungy, it had a secret network of racers and the cops were out to get you, and the FBI literally formed a secret police task force solely dedicated to street racing. Only this time, it's implied that the network that the racers communicated on functioned more like a street racing forum rather than like a hacker forum or something. And also, instead of a surveillance state, it was more like racers posting their own L's on social media for clout. Honestly, more realistic to how clout chasers in supercars would act in real life. After Rivals and Most Wanted 2012, Need for Speed would desperately try to recapture its popularity in the 2000s. The Need for Speed 2015 reboot was supposed to be Underground 3, but it was renamed because of the potential backlash after Most Wanted 2012, and it looked like it was a good call on their end. Heat and Unbound were quite decent, even riffing off of the pursuit mechanic that Rivals introduced. EA and Criterion would focus on Battlefield 6, and Need for Speed was largely abandoned. Every dog has its day, and it seems that Need for Speed's day has long since passed. If you're dropping by from Need for Speed, hi, I'm Nemo Kimono and I am a VTuber who also likes cars and racing. If you want to see me get good in the future at this whole YouTube stuff, you know what to do. Oh yeah, and also if you're wondering what this is my model. I designed it on Vroid. I'm gonna be improving on it a bit in the future. So yeah, hopefully you can stick around to see that. Okay, bye.